Good day and welcome to the Jack Chat Show. I'm Jack Bybee and I'm the host and presenter and near-death experiencer of the Jack Chat Show. I welcome you. The response to the show with a minimum amount of marketing has quite frankly been astounding. I welcome you in Egypt, in India, believe it or not, my home country of South Africa. Welcome. Alles van die beste, hoor. Uh, I see people from Russia, China, Germany, around the world. It's wonderful. I greet you from Arizona, where the mountains are blue and the sky is bluer, and the rattlesnakes rattle as well. Um, I had a near death experience way back in 1972 as I was trying to get out of apartheid South Africa. That's history. It's over. It's done with. It was a marvelous experience. But, my friends, everything I tell you is subjective. There is no empirical evidence that I can show you or anyone else. I can steer you to the resource page on the jackchatshow.com, and I can steer you to evidence that NDE researchers have done, an accumulation of data. But in the end, it's all subjective. My reason for doing this, my reason for the show, the rationale, is simply, as I've said, I think it was in the very first or second Jack Chat, that it is to help you prepare for the inevitable. I was caught completely by surprise. I hope you won't be. Okay, that's the recap. Let's get on with the chat. I experimented a little bit this past week, and I created a um, a trailer, almost a preview of the show. If you responded to that preview, that trailer, please send me an email, or even faster, at Jack Chat Show, at sign Jack Chat Show. That's my tweet handle, my Twitter handle, Twitter, whatever. Anyway, I'd love to know how you learned about the show. If you help me, I can respond to you. What, as I've said before, I am I have spoken with a number of people who know far more about religion and psychology than I doubt I ever will. And not one of them can come up with an explanation, and that is the or an explanation that I ask, where in the religious, psychological, in the philosophical, that you know so much about, where is there a description of life on the other side, in death consciousness? And the answer is there isn't. And what I've taken a couple of weeks and months really to wrap my head around, as they say here in the States, to gain an understanding of, is the fact that my I don't know what you call them, my fellow NDEers, my fellow near-death experiencers, they're the ones who can corroborate pretty much what I say. But other than that, there's not much out there. So it's rather an interesting little path of discovery. Okay, what is coming up? Um, I have an interview uh, in the show in a few minutes' time with Dr. Lobby Smith. She's up in Flagstaff, Arizona, and she will be telling us about one of her experiences. She works with vibrations, energy vibrations, as well as with horses. And I have a 10-minute interview with Dr. Smith. I've mentioned a couple of times the three questions that I maintain are probably the most important three questions that anybody, any spirit, will have to answer. Those three questions are: what have you done with the life just past? Whom have you loved and been loved by? And what have you learned? Let's take the first question. I ran this past a friend of mine, and he looked at me and he said, well, the first thing you've got to realize is that it wasn't said in anger or in a domineering manner. The voice of the being of light, once you've heard it, or rather, let me put it this way, once I've heard it, I'll never forget that voice again. Kind, loving, authoritarian, yes, but in a commanding manner, but a loving commanding manner, if you can understand that. And my friend said to me, but perhaps you should try answering the question yourself. And so I tried. It's not very easy. I mean, I was asked this question as my spirit transitioned from the earth plane to the other side. What have you done with the life just past? Well, if I had to try to answer that question now, there are three things that I feel, or four things really, that I feel very, very proud about. For one, I was seriously ill. Seriously ill. I've overcome that. How? Mind over matter, quite frankly. Two, thanks to the American taxpayer, I'm now educated. I have a BA, or soon will have a BA, and I'll have the certificate to prove it as well. Thirdly, I have a marvelous child, absolutely marvelous, that I am totally astounded with. And the very last thing that's just come to fruition, I suppose it would be the best word, is you. Me taking this show and putting it onto the internet and trying to help you. What have I done with the life just past? When I get asked that question again, well, I hope I would have helped one or two of you out there on this beautiful planet of ours and helped you understand that in the end, when your time and my time come, it's not the end. It's really just the beginning of another phase. Hold on, please. Of course, I really don't know if I'm succeeding with the Jack Chat show for a very simple reason that I haven't had, or I have very little response from you, the viewer. Please send me a tweet, send me a comment on the jackchatshow.com, and we'll get on to the next. We'll get on to Dr. Libby Smith's interview in a few minutes' time. I'm just, she's going to be very shortly to tell us about her work with energy and vibrations. Before we get there, I'd like to cover quickly after the interview. I'd like to cover what Kenneth Ring, one of the foremost NDE researchers here in the United States, talks about as planetary visions. These are visions that people like myself, the near-death experiencer, are shown on the other side. And I'm going to run a couple of those past you just so you can puzzle over that. The other thing I'd like to touch on is something I read in Carl Gustav Jung's Psychology and Western Religion. And it's something that is very, very interesting to me. It deals with right it deals with wrong, and it deals with time. And especially time on the other end is non-existent. Time, right and wrong. Jung, at last, I found someone who actually agrees with me that these are all constructs of man. Yes, the near-death experiencer gets to be philosophical and medical and psychological and religious. Stay tuned. Here comes Dr. Livy.
Tell you briefly about my experience. When I was 6 years of age, I ran through a glass door, and my grandmother decided that it would be best to pull a 4-inch, about 4 by 6 inch piece of glass from my leg. And when she did, she tore the femoral artery, and I was dying. And I came up out of my body, but I felt an incredible peace and knew I wasn't going to die. And my mother was crying, and I could see everyone around. And I just knew I was going to be okay. And I stayed out of body all the way until the hospital, when a nurse came up with a very long hypothermic needle. And at that point, I remember slamming back into my body.
Okay, interesting. That's it's the strange thing. The trip I took after being carried down the stairs at the YMCA in Cape Town, South Africa, I followed out of body. I followed the ambulance all the way to the hospital, and I remember seeing Table Mountain and the Eagle, and I said, "It's too nice a day to die," and I went straight back into my body. Why I thought I was going to die right then, I haven't got the slightest idea, but that's pretty much what's going to happen.
Okay. I'm writing a book. I'm almost finished. The title is What's the Matter? And Jack, it's about matching vibrations. It's about projecting out into the world, reflecting the equal thing back, which is really just a law of thermodynamics, and then making a connection so that the meaning becomes very clear.
Oh.
So we can use it in mind, body, and spirit.
Interesting. Well, I'd be interested to read that. There could easily be a market for that.
Well, great. I'll send you a copy.
Thank you. I looked into your background online last night, and I was quite astounded at what I found. You're a dual PhD, a dual master's, and a dual BA. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. And you a Reiki master, and you an ordained minister.
Yes.
Anything else you'd like to add to that list?
Well, let's see. I was a personal trainer, and I'm also certified as a clinical hypnosis practitioner and a regression therapist, and also in a healing modality called Synertia. And I think that is about it.
That's about other than
oh, yes, and I guess I forgot to. I'm certified as a spiritual life coach and also as an equine assisted therapist.
Well, I had the pleasure of sitting down to lunch with you, so that was lovely. I'm of the opinion that the vibrations that we emit here on the earth plane tend to follow us and to shape our future on the other side. Now, you said you had an out-of-body experience, but can you comment how the consequences of our actions here and now, how does that shape up as far as your research goes? How does that shape up with what could be experienced in the hereafter?
Oh gosh, Jack, that's a great question. I love it when Einstein talked about that our actions are like ripples in the water.
Right.
And we see the ripple end, but the energy goes on, and because energy and our physical universe is linear, that ripple continues and moves around and comes back and washes over us. That could be likened to karma or the law of reciprocity, and that's really project, reflect. So we may do something harmful or something kind in this life, And that may not come back to us until the next life, but it does eventually come back.
It's what I just heard this in America after I got here, but it's an American expression called "what goes around comes around," right?
Oh, that's wonderful. That perfectly describes the ripple effect.
Right. Interesting. Tell us more about how you working with horses and energy of horses.
Oh gosh. I'll tell you two stories that stand out the most, Jack. I had a cancer patient. She had just finished chemotherapy, and she was in the round pen observing the horses. And are you familiar with yoga poses?
Vaguely. My knee hurts.
Humans to do. And I looked over to the side, and one of the mares was doing downward facing dog. Now, a mare to do that pose, you'll have to look it up, Jack. It's a very difficult pose. All and right. I turned to my client and I said, "What does this mean to you?" And she said, "I'll tell you what it means. One of my medical practitioners told me I needed to do yoga."
And the horse was actually doing it.
The horse was showing her what she needed.
You're kidding me.
No, oh, Jack, I can fill books with those kinds of stories.
Go ahead, please. Any more examples? That'll be wonderful.
Okay, I'll tell you a personal story that's in my book about the project reflect model. I was in a three-way kind of triangle relationship with a couple, and it was really toxic, just very toxic. And I was the middle person and between this couple. And I went to work one day, and I was working with some residential treatment folks, and a 1,000-pound horse named Boo decided to run straight at me, running right into me. I went up in the air, came down, could feel every vertebrae in my back pop. I slammed my head on the ground. I broke a rib, I'm sure, broke a wrist. But I lied there laughing, Jack, because I realized that he was showing me that I was being blasted, that I was under the bus.
Right.
So I laughed and I got up and I finished the session and I went home and I was fine because I connected with what the energy was telling me.
Exactly. Wonderful story, Libby. Just to build on what you said about the horse in the yoga pose,
yes.
It's not quite the same thing. My hometown was 80 miles away from Cape Town. I would work in Cape Town, come back, and my border collie would often be lying on the sidewalk waiting for me to come back on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
And we planned it that I wouldn't call, I wouldn't tell anything. He couldn't hear that I was coming home. One day, but every Saturday afternoon, he'd be lying on the sidewalk just waiting for me. One day, I walked around the block and came up behind him and caught him sleeping on the job. If you ever want to see a canine looking embarrassed, dog looked embarrassed that day.
That's a great story, Jack.
All right, thank you. Dr. Smith, it's 10 minutes are up already, and I've got to keep the many thanks for coming. I don't know if you know this, but the first two, I'd love to ask you back. And before we go, tell the viewers the name of your book again, please.
It's called What's the Matter?
What's the Matter? Do you have a publisher already or not?
I have one chapter left to go. I'm working on the cover right now, and I'm just about finished.
Oh, good. And do you have a publisher?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't. Do you have one?
I've got an idea, but that, Dr. Smith, many thanks indeed, and many thanks for the person who helped you get on the air. This should broadcast May the 26th.
Great, Jack. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it very much.
Many thanks indeed. I had a little bit of a technical problem. My power supply on the laptop I'm using, a marvelous little laptop, but that decided to act up last night. It might have been my vibrations even that caused it to. Anyway, I had to stop, and I'm just finishing up. Technical difficulties do come up from time to time. I was talking about the planetary vision I saw or was shown, the many planetary visions and lessons I was shown. And I I mentioned this one about the lights starting to come back on again. That has always puzzled me because, in the end, I'm part of the IT community on this planet, and yes, IT managed to solve the Y2K problem. If I'm right, if that's what caused the outage in Europe that I was shown, but the problem is it didn't come about. Neither, as far as I can tell now, um, am I a money grubbing uh, materialist. I don't believe I am. So why was I shown these lessons? To keep me from doing stuff? Maybe. Here I try to walk a straight and narrow path. Um, is that what the life review was all about? I don't know. Maybe I'll learn these lessons or get the answers at least in future lives. But the goal of the Jack Chat show is to try to allay fears of death. That's my goal here and now. And not that, as I said last show, not that it gives anybody license to take their own life or the life of anyone else. That's a no-no. What I do want to cover now are three concepts that I found confirmation with or by Carl Gustav Jung, who had some metaphysical experiences himself. And yes, his work is not empirical, but I turned up in Psychology of the Western Religions, a very interesting book by Jung that I've read from cover to cover, and other than the Greek, I've been able to understand a little bit. Jung talks about right and wrong, and also about time. Let's deal with the things I don't know too much about. Right and wrong. Right and wrong is a very philosophical thing, and I'm not a philosopher, but the being of light that I encountered, the being God, there's no right or wrong. God doesn't judge, so how can I? Uh, Who does judge us in the end? And I know this is where, as far as religion is concerned, I'm going right smack bang against religion on this one. God doesn't judge. God is not an angry, nasty, commandeering entity. Or let me put it this way, not the God I encountered. The being of light I encountered is perfect. Perfect love oozes out of that entity. Who judges? In the end, we do, the spirit, me. I judged myself in the life review. All the being of light did was show me a scenario of my past life. And I would hear the voice, was that a loving thing to do? Whoops. Um, in the context of perfect love that surrounds me here, no, not really. And that's what keeps me on the straight and narrow. But does God judge? Is there a book that God points to, hey, you didn't do this right and you should have done that. That's not what I found. But again, it's very hard, if not, I don't believe in the impossible, because anything is possible, really. But it's very difficult for me to prove anything of what I say. It's so subjective, it's so personal. So you want to prove me wrong? Go ahead. Um, so that takes care of Jung and right and wrong. I agree with Jung, Carl Gustav Jung. You can't know up if you don't know down. You can't know what freedom is until you know what a police state is like. You can only appreciate your freedoms when you've experienced not having those freedoms. You can only experience right once you know what wrong or evil is. And I don't really believe there is really a concept of evil. We are negative, but are we evil? I don't believe so. We're perfect. We just go astray from time to time. But my favorite topic and why I've read up on quantum physics is because Jung mentions time. What I experienced on the other side was movement between point A and another point, basically in eternity. And I could have been at that other point along the sands of eternity, what I call the beaches of eternity, instantly. How? By thinking and getting there. And what the little I know about quantum, and I really am researching this because it explains, it's the only concept I know of, the only theory I know of that explains life existence on the other side of the earth plane in death consciousness. If two protons can know what they are, what each other are doing, and go through this double slit experiment and basically have an intelligence of their own, because that's the only way it can be explained, then it explains how in death consciousness, how movement occurs. I saw, or was shown really, an undulating wave with cubes on the crests. Cubes, which I was told are universes. Yeah, it sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? And these universes stretched along this undulating wave into eternity. That's an awful lot of universes. And we think, and until my experience, I thought this universe, let alone solar system, let alone galaxy, this was the only one there was. Oh no, as what did Shakespeare say? There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in our philosophy. Due to the technical hitch last night, I apologize, but I do not have next week's uh, curriculum up. However, I'll put out another trailer in a day or two, and I hope you'll watch that. I'll have what we're discussing next week. It'll probably be another mention of one or two more life lessons that I learned on the other side. Please leave me some comments. Tell me how I'm doing. Are you benefiting? Are you not benefiting? Is there something you want me to cover? The response is being astounded. I'm astounded by it. I believe there were 26 different countries as of this morning that in 20 days with hardly any advertising. Something's going on. That's lovely. I'm so pleased you're tuning in. Keep tuning in. Keep listening. I hope you benefit. Until then, until next time, may you walk in peace, journey in delight. May the blessings of the Perfect One be with you and yours always. Namaste. Until next time.